So this is 7 minutes past the time. Maybe before we start, I would just quickly go through a short introduction. And I think a lot of people who have been joining us for some time will be very familiar with a lot of activities that we carry out. So good afternoon and good day to all from anywhere you are joining us. It's a great pleasure to join you again on this digital roundtable. So let me try to share my screen. So today we have an erudite scholar amongst us in our midst to do justice to this topic on conflict negotiation and mediation in organizations. For those who know much about what we do on the digital roundtable on social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystem, we try to bring scholars, experts to join us to share their wealth of experience with us as far as entrepreneurial ecosystem is concerned. And not only entrepreneurial ecosystem, something related to developmental goals and all those developmental projects, project management, down to the use of necessary tools that can help you improve on your entrepreneurial journey. So this program is a partnership between Lifeline Development, Worldwide AFRIDAT, and AFRIDAT. And we're happy to have Suparna in our midst. And I also have the president of Worldwide, Kayo, here. So maybe he has something to say before we start.
Nothing in specific. Welcome, everybody. I'm quite excited to hear from Suparna about this topic because it's quite relevant in everything we do in our projects. Well, we could tell you stories about conflicts that led to the breakdown of a project. And well, anyhow, let's see. Let's hear. Floor's open to you, Suparna. Thank you.
So, Suparna, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining. I'll share my screen. Okay, so is it visible?
Yes.
And is it audible properly?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. And today I'll be speaking on, I'm Suparna, and I'll be speaking on conflict, negotiation, and mediation in organization. So these are some of the topics that I will be sharing. I'll be speaking on conflict and the basics and its advantages, disadvantages, negotiations, mediations, and the most important of all, the contextual significance. Under that, I'll be discussing three main things: culture, communication, and empathy. And lastly, Batna. So why would you listen to me? That is the most important question, I guess. So I have done a PhD on conflict. I have been working on the topic of conflict for the last 10 years almost, although I have been looking at it from a socio-political context, but obviously there are many similarities with regard to the basics, be it in political organization, be it a corporate organization, be it in any development organization. So I have a sociology and political science background, and in order to understand conflict, one of the most important thing is to understand the human perspective. So without understanding from what perspective the conflict is arising, the understanding conflict, negotiation, and mediation remains incomplete. So I've also worked in organizations, and therefore I will try to combine the knowledge of both academics and organization in order to give a holistic understanding of this topic. Now, before I begin, there are some in scope and out scope of the topic that is necessary to understand. So for example, I'm not a guru. I will not say that there won't be any conflict, that if you do these things, there won't be any conflict. Our assumption is there will be conflict whenever we are dealing with human beings. And so what we do after that, that is the crux of the talk, today's talk. Why is it important to know? Because every time we talk about interdisciplinary, we talk about different culture, we talk about cross culture, all these terms are thrown like randomly in today's world. And if you notice very carefully, there are so many social science concepts which are being incorporated and which are being adopted by the corporate culture. For example, design thinking, storytelling, these are very social and behavioral science background which are being adopted by the corporate organizations. So that is why it is important to understand conflict from such a perspective. Now, obviously, don't expect a one-time discussion and from tomorrow onwards, we all will be a skilled negotiator or mediator. It is all about practice, because this is how we are made up of. This is our identity. This constitutes our identity. And overnight, it is not possible to get rid of this identity. It's a matter of practice. So what are we trying to do in this talk? We will try and understand the deep-rooted behavioral tendencies that actually lead to conflict, so that we remain mindful of these tendencies, we remain mindful of these biases, and conflicts can be addressed and maybe also reduced to a large extent. And at the end, do not shy away from posing questions. It will help us both to learn and grow. So there are two fundamental questions that needs to be talked. Who are human beings and why do they behave the way they behave? Now, when we talk about human beings, they are not just the physical or biological beings that we are talking about. They are an entire mix of social, cultural, and political context in which we often forget to see human beings, but that is how they are made up of. They are fashioned and conditions by various social elements, by various social paraphernalia. One person will react differently in similar circumstances, and not just in different circumstances, and we will be very much surprised. So when we actually go and meet, greet, and interact with any person, it is this entire package there we are meeting and greeting. It is not just the human beings at that particular time and space. It is this entire background that we are talking about when we are meeting a person. So this entire socio-cultural context in which a person is placed. And once we remain mindful of these perspectives, it will help us to understand the background behind their behavior. So who are the players in an organizations? They can be colleagues, they can be hierarchical players, there can be partners, they can be stakeholders, and we have to remain mindful about the audience with whom we are interacting. The way we will interact with our colleagues will not be same the way we interact with our partners or stakeholders, or maybe our superiors. So in simple terms, what does conflict means, or when does it occur? Two opposite views, two opposite opinions, they just do not match. In simple basic language, in simple basic terms. Now there are three types of conflicts that is generally talked about. The source is from Harvard Program on Negotiation. Any kind of conflict that we come across can be grouped under either of these three categories. So first is the task conflict. Someone has allotted a task to you, or you have taken a task upon yourself and you fail to complete the task within a deadline. And that give rise to conflict. However, it is not that simple. It is not just about the deadline and the time. It is about the process we approach the task. For example, two people are working in the same team, and they know what their objective is. They know they have to complete the task within a certain period of time, but maybe they have two different perspectives to work on that same task. They have two different approaches, and there is no one right or wrong approach. We have to, whenever we work in an organization, we have to keep three things in mind: time, resources, and money. So here at this point of time, if there is a clash on the basis of processes, we have to trade off, and the least costly one have to be accepted. It is not about the individual, it is about the reaching the objective of the organization, fulfilling the mission and vision of the organization. The second is relationship. First day I go to work and I don't get along well with one of the partners, or I started on a wrong foot with a colleague. So what do we do? The best task, and which always works, is take them out for a coffee, or take them out for a lunch or a casual walk. The idea behind this approach is to find that common ground. You may differ, but you always know that we have to work with this person for the maybe next 5 or 10 years. So how do we get along with this person? So we have to find that one or two common ground, maybe that favorite player, maybe that favorite song, or that vacation that you wish you could have taken, or maybe your children are of the same age. So that obviously not too personal. For example, in Germany, there are certain subjects that are tabooed. You cannot talk about religion, you cannot talk about politics, and generally not money. But there are topics which you can talk, for example, sports, you can talk about weather. So relationship is another type of conflict which we generally find in organizations. Third, and which is the most important, is the value. Now, people have certain fundamental differences on the basis of their identities. For example, on the basis of politics, religion, you find a person who is maybe have extreme political views, or he may be a racist, he may be a homophobic. How do you deal with that kind of a person? The first ideal thing is to separate the person from the problem. But it is not always that easy, because on the basis of those ideas, on the basis of those values of that person, his approaches towards the work are also determined. I'll give you one example. For example, you come across a client who has been dealing with a corrupt government in some country. So on the drop of a hat, would you just stop working with that client? It is not that easy. So you have to separate the person from the problem, and as long as it does not come to haunt the task at hand, there is no problem in going along with it. For example, you are working in a development organization, and you know a person who has some extreme views on migrants, but you know you have a project where you have received funding, a huge funding, where maybe some rehabilitation work of the migrants will have to be done. So it is in such a situation where the value of the person comes in conflict with the values of the organization and mission of the organization. So it is that point of time, again, you have to sit down and you have to separate the two and try to find a common ground to get along with the task at hand. Now, why is it important to study conflict? It can be in development, it can be in your corporate, it can be your own startup. Now, there are Now, these are certain terms that we hear very often nowadays, and they are just thrown randomly, but they don't have just random meanings. They have very specific socio-cultural connotation. We hear about teamwork, we hear about cross-cultural, we hear about interdisciplinary. So what is the importance of all these? It helps us to develop diverse perspectives. It helps us in our interpersonal skills. That short column in our CV where we have to write our core competencies, where we have to write our soft skills. These are the things which organizations look for. Now, whenever we hear the term conflict, it is generally the negative connotations that gets associated with it. However, it is not always the case. There are situations of constructive conflict as well. It encourages healthy debates. There is a thesis, there is an antithesis. Both of them comes in conflict with each other, and they can give rise to synthesis. This theory is generally applied in case of innovations. We see so many innovations, so many startups coming up nowadays, and it is this background, this philosophy which works behind this entire teamwork. It helps us to clarify doubts, queries, better problem solving capabilities, and it teaches flexibility. It makes us humble. It makes us to look beyond our own ego. It makes us to work in the team by compromising with what we believe in. But obviously there are disadvantages of conflict, and which is mostly the case. It deviates from the main objective. You attend a meeting early in the morning and there are two people who have huge personality clashes, and the entire meeting goes waste without any constructive dialogue about the agenda. So it gives rise to stress and anxiety, creates problems not only for your personal growth, but also for your professional growth. But what I find interesting is it sidelines the introverts, the unaggressive members, those who are not that outspoken, those who are not that they don't want to participate in such an aggressive behavior condition, in such an aggressive circumstances. They will always shy away from participating. They will always shy away from speaking their minds, and they will not only be neglected, they, for example, for a promotion, they will generally not be considered. So this is a negative culture of conflict. Fourth is low retention of employees. Definitely constant bickering might give rise to a culture in the organization, which many people would not be very comfortable to work in. And definitely it's time consuming and costly. Now, there are certain similarities. Before we move on to the differences, there are certain similarities when we talk about negotiation and mediation. They're just one step or two steps behind litigation, where you go on to you waste a lot of money and resources. There are huge departments in big organizations, litigation departments, which deals with these issues. In both the cases, you have to know your audience. There is no one single framework which will be applicable for all the situations. You have to know your audience and accordingly you have to behave. It helps us to develop our interpersonal skills with the people, with the organization, with our teammates, even with outsiders. It helps us to work in teams, always focuses on bigger objective, and last but not the least, shared ambition towards a collective goal, because it is always the or work at hand or the objective, mission and vision of the organization that becomes priority. Now, negotiation, it is as very simple. Two conflicting individuals, they will just sit in front of each other, they will interact, they have been having this conflict for a very long time, and they try and settle. Now, generally, the outcomes of negotiations are binding because it is the people who are the actors in this conflicting scenario. They actually sit in this negotiation. But in case of mediation, that is not the case. Now, I'll explain it through a case study, which will be useful. So CBS and Time Warner, actually, this is an incident of 2013. Now, Time Warner Cable had an issue with CBS network over their processing fee. So CBS, the Time network, decided to black out all the CBS channel across various cities from America. After a point of time, they realized that their subscription has been going down, and it has gone down substantially. So by the time they realized, they could figure out that the subscribers were not particularly unhappy with Time Warner Cable, but they were unhappy about the fact that they could not see CBS network. Now, this is one stage of the problem, where blinded by their own urge and rage, Time Warner actually did a very negative approach towards themselves. They forgot to see that this could actually come to haunt them. Now comes the negotiation part. When the CBS, when Time Warner actually called CBS for a negotiation, CBS knew at the very first go that they are at an upper hand position, that they are in upper position. They can twist the entire negotiation towards their own favor, and that is exactly what they did. They not only increased the processing fee in their favor, but they also adopted the rights to share their contents across various web-based platforms like Netflix. Now, the second lesson, Time Warner did not have any other option other than agreeing to these conditions, because they thought that something is at least better than nothing. They know very well that without this collaboration with CBS, it won't be possible for them to continue for a very long time, because subscription will continue to decline at every stage. So these are the two lessons that we get to learn, that most of the times we feel the urge to establish our point of view, but in negotiation that may not always be a very suitable solution. And secondly, instead of losing the entire thing, it is always better to have something. So these are the two lessons we get from this particular case study. Now, mediation, in case of mediation, the primary question that is generally asked is, why is the dispute important to you? Generally, in case of mediation, there is always a third person, a neutral observer, who comes to the scenario, and he or she tries to settle the entire situation, address the entire situation. The terms and conditions are much more flexible. Definitely they are formal, but they're much more flexible. However, they're not as binding. Although the two people are coming to an agreement, most of the time it happens that the mediators first meet the two individuals separately, and then once the common grounds are established of the discussions, only then the two conflicting parties are brought in the same room and the discussion proceeds from there on. However, since it is the ultimate say rests with in the hands of the mediator, the agreements drawn at the end of the meeting may not always be binding. It is definitely costly, time and money. Many a times it happens that the mediators are appointed from outside, but in many cases it happens that the organizations have in-house mediation process. And generally we see in case of sexual harassment at workplace, nowadays every organization must have this particular department where there are mediators who will be talking to the individuals, and then both the parties will be brought together. However, the ultimate question that any mediator tries to find answer to is, what is the intention behind the action? why is the dispute so important to the conflicting parties? For example, I had an issue when I first moved to Germany. I mean, I come from India, so naturally the climate over there is very hot and humid. When I come here, so I used to share my office space with a German colleague of mine, and she would, and this was during the initial period. So I was very surprised, and it was very cold in December, January, and she would continuously open the window after every 2-3 hours in order to let the fresh air in. And so I was feeling very irritated and annoyed. So actually one of the seniors, who is also from Asia, he actually noticed this entire scenario, and he brought the two of us together, and he gave us a friendly suggestion that why don't you take this approach? So for example, when Suparna goes out for lunch, or when she's out for a meeting, at that point of time you open the window, and the rest of the time let it remain open. Or there was an adjoining room where we had a common door, so he suggested, why don't we keep the door open of that particular room, so that there will be a cross ventilation and the room will remain airy all throughout. So that was a suggestion, but these are certain common things which we encounter every time whenever we are sharing office space. It also happens with ACs, especially in hot areas. Now comes the socio-cultural context of all of these three topics: conflict, negotiation, and mediation. In all of these three, we have to keep in mind that context is always a key. I will discuss three important topics here. The first is the culture. The question is, why do people behave the way they behave? And we have to understand this question very importantly nowadays, because there are two ideas. One is to internationalize. We are running towards globalization, where in one company, in one office space, there are people all across the globe, all team members who sit together and they work. Not only that, there are companies which are opening their branches all across geographical boundaries. So how do we operate in such a scenario? Now, anthropologist Edward T. Hall, in his seminal work, The Silent Language, released in 1959, talks about two particular cultures, which is very important in this kind of understanding organizational behavior. There are two. One is high context and low context culture. Now, as the name suggests, in case of the high context culture, the emphasis on the context. There will be less of verbal and non-verbal cues. The entire understanding from the conversation will have to be derived from the body language of the person, from the inadequate sentences, from the little bit of microfacial expressions of the people involved. And then there is the low context culture, where people actually say what they want to say. This work has to be done, and they will exactly say you what has to be done. There are less room for anticipation. There are less room for any kind of using your own brain. Now, I'll give one example. So Harvard Business Review conducted a study on this particular topic. And so they went to a Louis Vuitton store, and they were talking to the manager of that store. And the manager informed them that according to the Louis Vuitton culture, it is actually the mystery lies in half sentences. And it is a very westernized company. You can understand it's very sophisticated, it's very fancy, but they believe in this high context culture, where they will never end the sentence in a meeting, because since it's a creative company, since it is, they want to keep the doors of creativity open. They want its partners, they want its team members to use their imagination to end the sentence. So this is one example. Similar thing happened when they started working with Thai team. So this now, according to the Thai culture, they generally love to remain prepared before a meeting. They would expect a meeting agenda to be sent to them before, for example, 24 hours or 48 hours before, so that they get time to prepare. But when they started working with the US team, they saw that US team would suddenly prepare a meeting on that particular day, and they will send them all that agenda and the details. Most of the time, the Thai team would remain quiet. They would never speak up. So US team were a little confused, and they went on to discuss the issue, kind of in a sense of complain, raise the issue to their superior authority. Now, the organization had to appoint a mediator. And the mediator studied both these teams, both the US team and the Thai team. And the mediator found out that it goes against the Thai culture to not speak unless asked to. So they consider it as disrespectful, they consider it as rude to speak if not spoken to or if not asked. So this obviously the US team was unaware of. They thought that they are not prepared or they were not participating in the meeting. So this kind of gave rise to a confusion and a culture clash. So once all this, both the teams were brought together and the issues of these two cultures were shared with each other, they started working, and from then onwards, every time that team would have a meeting, the US team would separately ask, do you have anything to say to the Thai team members? Do you have anything to contribute? So this is how the entire issue was resolved. Second is communication. Communication is not just words. It is both the verbal and the non-verbal clues. And not just also when we are talking about the verbal clues, it is the words that you choose and the way you speak it. It is both the voice, the intonation, the body language, everything combined constitutes a communication. And communication, if we are not that mindful, it is actually a product of culture. So once you can understand the culture, you will be able to understand the communication process of a particular culture. Again, I'll give you one example. So this happened, I'll give you actually two examples. So one is with L'Oreal. Again, according to the company culture of this fancy brand is that they love to debate openly. They think that the more strongly we disagree in meetings, it actually gives rise to excellence and it generates creativity. So that is their company culture. Now, no problem with that as long as they are working in the Western setup and as long as people are aware of this kind of culture. However, when they opened a branch in Mexico, and the people from the Mexican team would be very much confused, because in a meeting they would keep quiet, because they think once again that disagreement and stopping a person from from speaking what they are speaking is considered again a disrespectful. It is rude. So it is an aggressive thing to talk about, to stop a person and then speak your own mind. So there is no one right or wrong approach. There is no one right or wrong communication. It is just, we have to understand from where people are coming from. We have to understand this entire socio-cultural context and sit down together and find that common ground that will help us to work in our mission. Same thing happened with Google. Now, Google is a country in itself. It's a multinational corporation with huge, organizational culture. It has a culture of its own. Now, when Google actually gave feedback forms for its employees, the first question that is asked is to give the positive review about the employee. Now, when Google opened an office in France, the French people were a little flabbergasted, because they thought, according to their own culture, it is generally the criticism which is said out loud. The good things, the positive things are generally very subtle. So they were not very used to this kind of culture. So when a feedback form was given to a French guy, he saw that the criticism was only at the end, and all the previous questions were about the positive things that he had to write. So it is two different culture clash, two different ways of communicating of the entire company's culture. Another example I can give is when Chinese actually say yes, that can also mean no. So this German guy in an organization was actually presenting his presentation about a project, and all the Chinese team were continuously nodding their heads and they were saying yes, yes, yes. But once they went out of the meeting, the deal never got finalized. The deal was cancelled. So this German guy asked one of his Chinese colleague that what is the reason. So once again, this Chinese colleague said to the German guy that no, we are generally conflict averse. So out in the open, we will not say anything bad about a person. Rather, it is our duty to encourage the person in front of everybody, not to show him down, but which means there are also opportunities, or also options of actually saying no after coming out of the meeting. But that will be done in a very subtle manner, and that will be conveyed and communicated in a very private manner instead of saying it out loud in the open. And the third is the empathy. Now, Daniel Goleman, all of us have heard about him. He's the writer of the seminal writer of Emotional Intelligence. He says that empathy will become one of the key components of leadership skills today and from now onwards. It is very different from egocentrism. The opposite of empathy is egocentrism. So how does egocentrism operate? So I stand in the middle and the entire world revolves around me, which means I tend to look at the world from my perspective. Now, we have to understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. Now, sympathy is generally you understand the situation, but you cannot relate to the situation. In case of empathy, we come down to that level of that person and we try to put ourselves in their shoes and try to see the world from their perspective. So we have to be very mindful about these situations. Instead of asking direct questions, we have to ask the right question. In case of empathy, you have been working with a colleague and he missed a deadline and your entire project got cancelled. You are infuriated, you're angry, but you never care to ask what is going on. He never behaved in this way. He was always very punctual. He always did his task more than my expectations. So, but we never care to ask what happened to him. Maybe his parents died in COVID, and we never care to ask never care to inquire what is happening behind his mind. So the best thing is two things, which is generally asked in an empathetic situation, is smiling. Ask about, not too personal though, obviously we talk about the personal issues. We don't talk about the personal issues in an organizations. And secondly, providing constructive feedback. Instead of saying that, why didn't you do this? We say that, I didn't see you performing as per my expectation or as per your potentiality. So this is saying the same thing, but in two different intonations, two different imageries goes to the receiver. So empathy is one of the other things that we have to keep in mind when we are talking about conflict, negotiation, as well as mediations. And last but not the least is Batna, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So we go to a negotiation with all our best possible options, but everything may not turn out to be the way we expected. So what we do, we have to keep 2-3 options open. Now, if you have used Doodle, you know that the person, for example, I share a Doodle to someone, it is always the time and date is according to my convenience. But the person to whom it is sent, he understands that, oh, I have been given so many options to choose from. He remains under this illusion that he is actually the one who is deciding, but it is not that case. It is the person who is sending it is actually deciding, and he sets the time and date according to his convenience and gives more than one options to work on it. Now, this concept was originally used by Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton in a 1981 book, Getting to Yes, Negotiating Without Giving In. Now, they are asking for 6 important steps that we have to talk about. Separate the people from the problem. We discussed it, that when we are talking about value conflicts, we have to separate the person from the conflict. Focus on interest and not positions. No matter what the position of that person is, you have to understand what interest actually makes the two of you work together. Learn to manage the emotions. In an organization, it is always important that we manage the emotions. Express appreciations at whatever, no problem. Just say that, oh, you have done a good job. You excelled more than my expectation. You put a positive spin on every message and escape the cycle of action and reaction. He said, she said, he said, she said. We will keep on doing it, and this action and reactions will continue without any solution. And I will end with another example of Microsoft and Netscape. It actually, it happened in 1996 when Microsoft was just entering into the business. And AOL, which is America Online, was a huge company at that point of time. They were seeking some internet browser. And Netscape at that period was one of the giants. They had technical superiority, and they had all the available options they knew they could afford. So Netscape went to AOL with this deal, but their fees were, they knew, they were very confident that they are the ones who would be getting this contract with AOL. So they went with their heavy-handedness and they charged a huge processing fee. Microsoft knew that what its low back is. It knows that its second best alternative is its first best alternative. No, they are not that technically superior at that point of time. But their second best alternative was the marketing business strategy, and they were very good at that. So when they went to pitch their idea to AOL, they said two things: that obviously we will be charging less per copy fee, but they also said another thing, that we will bundle AOL into the Windows browser. It is just like when you buy Android, there are certain inbuilt apps which you get automatically. So the same thing was offered to AOL, and AOL naturally jumped to this this option, and we know the rest is history. We don't hear of Netscape. Netscape almost ran out of business. And last, some parting words. In all these three, these are some of the main points that we have to remember. More than what we say, it is actually the way we say it that is important, and that matters. A very harsh tone, a very aggressive behavior may not always be appreciated. You might be passionate about your work, but it may not always be appreciated in an organization. Keep the ego in check, definitely. Keep the emotions in check, keep the ego in check. And last but not the least, we are talking about people, we are talking about team, we are talking about interpersonal, we are talking about cultural, cross-cultural. Do not rub someone's nose on an unfortunate negotiation position. And it happens quite often. But the bottom line is, we should not rub someone's nose on an unfortunate position. And it is not something moral or philosophical standpoint. It is important to say this because you never know when you need that person for your network, for your communication. So it is always best to keep the options open. And thank you for your time and for your attention. So time for some questions, feedback, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you, Suparna. Thank you for the lecture. I mean, I won't call this a lecture. It's a huge knowledge sharing. So I think everybody has the opportunity to ask questions, and yes, you can also share your camera. I mean, you have the floor to do that. Some questions? Go ahead.
Let me start again. I'm usually starting this question round. Thank you, Suparna. Thank you. So much information. Oof, quite difficult to follow you. You're talking so fast, and I need some to be more clear, because you said you had this one slide where you said that, okay, there are three types of conflicts, and it's always these. So each conflict can somehow be associated to one of these types, right? Or
more or less, yes.
So task, relationship, and values. And sometimes it can be both, probably, right?
Yes,
it can
yes,
be
yes,
related
absolutely.
to a task with relationship. This was a broad thing. I was like, phew. Task, relationship, and value. Can you maybe explain this again in your own words?
Yes,
again,
yes,
why
yes.
why is it these three types?
So I mean, since we are focusing only on organization, it is in
yes. Oh, this was a important piece of information. So this relates only to conflicts that arise in organizations. So it's not when because I was like thinking about other conflicts I have with like.
No. It is no. It is so. It is this. So more or less, because this is from Harvard Program on Negotiation. So more or less any kind of conflict, if you see in an organization, they more or less fall under any of these three categories: task, relationship, and values. The terms can differ, the labels can differ. This is that's why I'm saying, that's why I've always said the source. The source is from Harvard Program on Negotiation. The terms can vary, but more or less the idea remains the same. The idea remains this universal, that any kind of conflict in an organization, be it corporate organization, development organization, or even your own startup, you can be your own entrepreneur, but still have one of these problems. Nothing can be perfect. you are the boss and you are hiring people, but you don't know what they have been doing in their personal life. He might be, as I said, he might be a homophobic. You don't know, because when you are hiring him, obviously you are not inquiring about these issues. And it really doesn't matter whether he is these kind of things or not, as long as it does not have an impact on his way of thinking, on his approaches, and in turn on the work that he is doing. Like I said, an example, I mean, you work in a development organization, but you hired a person who has very extreme views on migration. For example, he doesn't quite like the migrants, he doesn't like refugees, but you have to work, you got a huge funding from an organization to actually do a project among the migrants, among the refugees, and you have no other option other than inviting him or making him the project manager. So what do you do in such a situation? There will be clashes, and because he will be coming up with ideas which obviously may not be ideal in that scenario. So you have to find out a common ground. And that is why at the end, it is said that you have to separate the person from the problem, and both of you have to sit and you have to find a common ground where his personal views will remain outside of the scope of this project. So that is the whole idea. But this is value, this is extreme, but there can be relationship and there can be task as well, which actually happens on a day-to-day basis. Value is something extreme, but relationship and task are something which we see quite often, and which happens, which we encounter on a day-to-day basis. No matter, you might be a Dalai Lama, I mean, still you will have people who may not like your approach, who may not like your, your ideas. So that's the point. Yeah.
Thank you. We have yes, Isa is raising the hand, and we have one question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead, Isa.
Thank you so much, Suparna. It's really a wonderful session, particularly your topic. It's really something that the real world needs now, particularly looking at the aspect of emotional intelligence, because globally, or let me say in Germany, this aspect needs to be enhanced, especially when we are working together, we are working with colleagues. Yeah, I will quickly like to ask this question. How do we monetize social engagement? And how do we equate it to productivity? Because this topic, it's a very important one that needs to be discussed, and it's a multi-million naira discussion. I would like to congratulate you for that, Suparna, for this wonderful presentation. So how do we equate it to in monetary term, and how can it enhance companies' success and productivity?
Thank you, Isa, for those encouraging words. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have agreed more. This is, and we have this entire philosophy and we have this entire belief that somehow these are all separate departments. These disciplines are very different. But you see, all these social science and behavioral science concepts are actually being incorporated nowadays in corporate culture, in development organization. I can still understand. But in corporate culture, they're actually borrowing these concepts. And as I said, design thinking, for example, it has become a huge market nowadays. Storytelling, it has become a huge market. So these are all borrowed concepts from social and behavioral science, trying to understand human beings from a different perspectives, which was not the case maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It was absolutely this, 1, 2, 3, 4, very, very, very systematic, very cross-cutting way of thinking. But this is no more the case. And as you said, social engagements monetize. There are agencies which are coming up, there are consultancies which are coming up to give this particular idea a more concrete shape and form. I know about this organization, which is a huge IDOU. This actually works only on design thinking, and it's a consultancy agency all across the globe. They approach them, they do webinars, now whether it is possible to actually, I mean, it is, to be very honest with you, if I can be honest with you, I mean, it is about practice. I mean, overnight, it is not possible that I become empathetic, and some of the very these might appear very harmless, but some of the comments, some of the talks that we say in our day-to-day life, it's actually not acceptable. But we kind of brush it aside as something very, it's harmless, no problem, it was just a joke. But it is these actually things which are now being taken seriously, and it is being brought into the, if I can say, mainstream, which was earlier the sidelines. They are actually now becoming mainstream. Say, for example, what kind of hair is that? My hair is like this. So this is it might appear a very harmless statement, but it's actually has got very deep social and cultural connotations. And this, which was generally we tend to forget, this is coming into the picture, and that is actually helping us to engage into this social engagement topic that you are talking about. I mean, we have to talk more and more about it. We have to bring it into mainstream. These are no longer sidelines. These are no longer outliers. This has to be brought into the mainstream. And those of us, to be very honest, I mean, I am an Asian, I'm a woman, I am in a Western country. So you can imagine there are some intersectionality of labels attached to me. Okay, so I have to deal with these issues on a regular basis. So instead of brushing it aside, we have to just keep it alive, keep it in the open. And monetizing, as I said, I mean, open a consultancy agency and give some good give some good advice to people. I don't know if I've answered you properly or not, but if someone has other things to say, just jump in. It's not about me telling. Please, there are many experienced people as well.
Yeah, Suparna, it's well addressed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Shegun?
Okay. First of all, very good lecture, very good presentation. It's really breathtaking, listening to you. I really don't have anything to say, but I want to ask. I mean, this is just personal, as an Asian or as an Indian, not an Asian, as an Indian. When you have been, probably if you are agreeing to something, right? You are agreeing to something. Do you do like this or like this? Because I'm a bit confused. Sometimes I look at you when I'm talking to you, you do like this, and I believe you agree, but yeah, but I want to know, is it one? I want to know two. Is it like an India thing or Bangladesh thing? Because that's the two people I've seen, the two I've noticed, I've observed personally. I don't know. Or it's just a personal thing to you, so I want to know, so that in the future when I'm talking to you, I will know if you agree with me or you are saying no.
No. Thank you. I mean, I faced this question even in my class as well. So when I was doing my coursework, and a German professor said, Suparna, why are you doing that like this continuously? So it's actually, I mean, like this means also agreeing. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely agreeing, but this is also agreeing. I mean, yeah. So this actually means you're understanding very intently. And this is just like nodding. Okay, you're saying I'm agreeing, but this is like when I'm saying like this is more intent. I'm like kind of digesting every word that you are saying. So that is more kind of intent, if I may say. But both of them agrees, yes.
Okay.
But that is very good.
I think on this, there's also a way we have the Pakistani do this kind of thing, and you feel everything is okay. But sometimes you see this with a lot of Africans. When they do this, it means something is really bad, So,
okay, yeah. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, we just don't know this, and the problem with us is we keep assuming things. I mean, a lot of problems will be solved if we just keep talking with people, but instead of that, we always assume things. This Nigerian author, if you know Chimamanda, she's very famous. So I read her books. Yeah. So she's a feminist author. So she's actually said a very important thing. I mean, so she has this typical African hair. She's from Nigeria. Okay. And she said a very important thing. She said that Michelle Obama would not have been the first lady if she had hair like me. So this is actually very important. Here is also political. We have to understand it is not just here. It is not just appearance. I mean, it would not have been possible, maybe for Michelle Obama had she not straightened her hair. So had she kept her identity to herself, it's again, it's not about judgment. It's not about good or bad, whether she did things right or wrong. It is about what she was trying to say, that hair can also be political. And here politics does not necessarily mean, you attach yourself to a political party. All these views that we have, it has a context, and that actually makes us political. So that is exactly what she was saying. She's very away from politics, but she said that hair can also be political. So this is exactly, I mean, these small clues we generally assume, we never clarify it, and that give rise to a lot of misunderstandings in when we are working in teams, when we are talking to people. Instead of clarifying it, just go and talk. What is the problem? I mean, see me, I can talk like whole day, I don't have any problem. But obviously there are people who are introverts, who cannot talk, and you have to reach out to them. There is no harm in it. I mean, I love to talk, for example. I mean, I can reach out to any person. I mean, there is no issue. If someone is introvert and feels that this is not my comfort zone, I cannot talk, just make him comfortable. I mean, what is the harm? I mean, very simple. This is very simple. There is no ego, nothing. Just go out and talk, and a lot of problems will be solved, I feel. But yeah.
So thank you very much. I mean, well clarified and really superb lecture.
Thanks.
If I may suggest, I will suggest that people should switch on their camera. Let's see each other. Let's get to also meet each other. And
okay, I think we have a question. Sorry, Ibrahim, in the chat.
Okay, so in the chat we have this question. Okay, okay. So from Malini.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I can repeat the question here. Thanks for this wonderful talk, Suparna. So I really thought it was like very detailed, and I liked what you said about like kind of being able to resolve conflict through empathy, and I like the fact that you say it's realistically, it's not like everybody is naturally empathetic. So probably it's a skill that one needs to cultivate. I think the little bit of well, I guess this is a slightly cynical view of things, perhaps.
No, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Given the fact that all people are not naturally empathetic, could it be that people might exercise it as a skill, but in practice, it could also become like a coercive move? You express a certain amount of empathy for somebody's parents who have been affected by COVID, but could it also become a kind of coercive move to, like bring round that person to your position and exercise the power of the privilege?
Right.
And especially given that organizations, institutions usually have a power hierarchy. It's almost impossible to escape a power hierarchy. So, I mean, of course, this could happen, but is there a kind of vocabulary in from your socio-political background that actually talks about this? That's my question.
I mean, thank you, Malini, for this for the question. I couldn't have agreed more. There are certain assumptions that we have to take it into account and then move forward. Whenever we are talking about organizations, the relationships that we set up in organization with the people, with the team members, with the hierarchical bosses, with our supervisors, they are not obviously relationships which we always look forward to or which we enjoy. But that is something which we have to get along with it. This is maybe an existential question that you're asking. Okay, we have to get along with it. And all these researches that goes on in organizations, particularly, for example, since I talked about this topic, conflict, mediation, negotiation, all the researches that goes on, they will never say that, yes, empathy can be imbibed or someone can actually internalize empathy and becomes empathetic. No, it is not that. It is always about the action. Okay, whether you can practice empathy in circumstances and context or not, that is the discussion. That all the researches that goes on around this topic. It is never the intention is never to change me. I might be a very, very rude, a very disrespectful person. But whether I am able to practice empathy or not in my 8 hours with my team members or not, that is the objective. So I agree with you. I mean, it is not possible. And as far as I know, I don't know any vocabulary. But like as I said, the entire research, the entire discussion is never to moral police or never to change you, but it is all about the action, whether you can achieve the task at hand by and with the people you are working with. At the end of the day, that is the crux of the matter. And whether you can achieve the objective, whether you can address the mission and vision of the organization, whether you are actually empathetic or not really doesn't matter. And people actually, to be honest, in organizations don't care also, as long as you show them that you are that. So it's always actually a mask that we are wearing, you know.
Okay.
I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, it is about the mask that we are wearing and how well we carry it off. I mean, so that the mask does not just fall off. You have to carry it in a very subtle manner, in a very cunning way, if I may say. But yeah, it's a very smart move. And I agree with your question. I mean, it's not possible to teach someone or to make them internalize it. But obviously, it is all about the practice, and it can never come overnight. It has to go on over and over and over again. I don't know if I answered your question, but
no,
yeah.
it makes perfect sense. It makes me imagine. I mean, I've not been in that context myself, but it makes me imagine that an HR wing of an
Exactly.
organization can, conduct like empathy training classes and bring in a few examples of intercultural conflict and
Exactly, and conduct workshops.
Yeah.
So the objective of any of these actions or any of these tools and techniques that are there that we practice, the idea is to whether you can practice it or not. Whether you internalize it or not, it doesn't matter to the organization. Whether you can show it off or not, that is what the question is. And all the research that goes on around this one. I mean, in the process, if someone changes themselves, if someone really becomes empathetic, that's a plus point. But to an organization, it really doesn't matter, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering that question. I think that was brilliantly answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for this time. And I think we have one or two information, and Shagun, the CEO of AFRIDAT, is also here to share some thoughts from a project that is about to end. And it's also a good way for us to explain much about what we do as far as the digital roundtable is concerned. If you have any topic to present, feel free to get across to us, and we'll give you the floor. And yes, next week we are going to begin our, let me just share my screen. I think it's also good for everyone to see this. So our workshop, which is coming up. So this is out there. And I think this time around, we are having over 30 participants that will be attending. So it's a lot of demand this time around. And there's a lot to learn. So we realize that there's a lot of people interested in social entrepreneurship. And we've done a lot to bring in different scholars together to give lectures on different topics. So from entrepreneurial spirit down to understanding stakeholder analysis, especially stakeholder analysis is a very good tool to help you understand the concept of conflict, mediation, and also negotiation, as well as some critical topics around this. So we welcome everybody who is interested to join. And I know from the end of Cairo, you also have a workshop coming up on project management. So maybe you can say something about this, Cairo, quickly before Shagun starts.